Welcome to the Lifestyle Practice Podcast. I'm Steve Vandegraff, happy to be your host this week. I want to give a special shout out and welcome to the new listeners joining our group. Hope that you guys find some inspiration and direction in the content that we share on this podcast. At the Lifestyle Practice, or TLP as we sometimes call it, we work with dentists one-on-one to create a practice that supports your ideal life. So often, owning a dental practice will dominate a person's life rather than act as a springboard for the things you really want. If you're willing to put the work in, make the right decisions, and become a leader that your team needs, you can build a phenomenally successful practice in terms of taking care of patients, finances for your family, and also in terms of having just an incredible work-life balance. If these are things that you want and you are picking up what we're putting down, so to speak, on this podcast, shoot us an email or contact us through our website. For today, I wanted to address a question that I hear very, very often from clients that I'm working with, from dentists that I talk to, and I had a lot of these complaints regularly with my office. It usually goes something like this. I'm super frustrated because my assistant, who has been here for 2 years, just cannot get this right. She makes the same mistakes over and over and should know what to do by now. It doesn't have to be an assistant, it can be a front desk or a hygienist or whoever, but the complaint is consistently some variation of that. So and so just does not get it right, and they should know by now. It is tough when a team member regularly makes mistakes. I don't want to downplay that. Usually patients get frustrated. It slows us down. It usually ends up as another little thing for you to do yourself, which adds up and becomes stressful. And then it's just kind of annoying since we do the same things over and over, day in and day out. We'd hope that they eventually get it, right? If you lead a team, it's inevitable that you've had these feelings before. But here are a couple points to help you address this and make this more rare in your practice and your life. The first is to stop assuming that they know they should be doing things differently. Stop thinking that they know better. If they're repeatedly making the same mistakes, they likely don't know, or they may have come to think that it's not important. Why? Because of your and my lack of action. When a dentist voices this type of frustration, I totally get it, but I like first to ask what they've done to solve the problem. So for example, if your assistant has to leave the op to get something every appointment, or they're not doing notes the way that you want them to, when did you last stop what you're doing and address it with them? Usually the response is, well, it's been a while, or I told her this once before. Often it's, well, she's been here long enough, she should know. But these all assume that your team member can read your mind. If we don't address something directly, the non-action on our part is actually communicating to our team member that we're just good with how things are going. They're doing fine and they don't need to change. But changing is really hard to do. First, it takes recognizing what specifically is being done wrong, then the knowledge of how to do it differently, and then lots of practice and lots of reminders for a long time to make sure our team member is doing it right. So often, dentists are not leaders and don't even take the first of these three steps with their staff. Instead, they keep fixing things themselves while quietly becoming more and more frustrated until they're ready to snap. So, talk with your staff. If something's off, whether it's small or big, they're not mind readers. You have to address it with them. I think I did an episode on this within the last couple of months, but it's so common. I want to emphasize that point. Next point. When I was a kid growing up, my parents generously enrolled me in piano lessons for several years. And despite this great opportunity, I am today, after all those lessons, a very poor pianist. I didn't like having to practice. When I got home from school as a kid, I did my newspaper route every day, and then I wanted to go and play with friends or play soccer or whatever. When I did practice the piano, it was very rushed right before a lesson because I was kind of scared to face my teacher, and the practicing was really sloppy. So, sorry to my parents, I totally dropped the ball on music. But I remember an important lesson that my piano teacher once told me. I was, of course, making almost no progress, and she stopped at the end of the lesson and said, "Practice does not make perfect. Practice makes permanent." We hear the first part of that a lot. Practice makes perfect. but not the second, which I think is more accurate. Practice makes permanent. What this means is you won't become an expert by repeatedly making mistakes that you aren't willing to correct and change. You just ingrain the mistakes. And instead of becoming really good with practice, you just become really good at doing a crappy job. And I think this really applies to our team. Working at the office for 2 years doesn't magically make somebody good at their job. Have they been trained to do things properly? Are they being held consistently to a standard? If so, then yes, the last couple of years will really help cement good habits. But if they've been doing things wrong for the last 2 years without us stepping in and regularly training and course correcting, all that time doesn't really help. It just helps cement bad habits. So think of yourself as a teacher. You are consistently correcting and demonstrating throughout every day. Let's go through a couple examples to help bring this home. Say tomorrow you go into the office in the morning and you see that you are not scheduled properly. You're not scheduled to goal, or your appointments are not prioritized like they should be. What do you do in this situation? What most dentists do is they put their head down and they work hard. They'll try to find some production, they'll try to drum up some work throughout the day. And I love this effort, but this but if this is all you do, you're making a big mistake. If you do not address the schedule directly with your front desk, then you're sending the message that there's no problem. This is not a big deal to us. This is a great way of practicing mistakes so they become permanent. Because she'll just schedule the same tomorrow and next week and on and on. Instead, become a teacher. Sit down with her, whether it's in the morning, at lunch, at the end of the day, but go through an image of the schedule as it was in the morning when you looked at it. Does she understand specifically what's wrong? Is it crystal clear to her what it should look like? Then look at tomorrow's schedule and next week. Does she know how to make it better? Show her how to build a perfect schedule so you're productive every day. I'll say here as an aside, if you yourself don't know how to do this, please reach out to us because you can't train her if it's something that you yourself don't know. Another example, if your assistant consistently makes mistakes when scanning or taking a PA, do you just try to make the scan work? Or do you try to diagnose off an imperfect x ray? If you do, that's reinforcing bad habits. Instead, put your teacher hat on. If a scan is off, show them where it's inaccurate. Tell them, I want you to do a scan. Excuse me. Tell them, I want you to do a new scan. And I'm going to sit here and watch over your shoulder and we'll see where we're going wrong. Then you watch her and you stop her at the part where she's messing up. Adjust her wrist or whatever and just show her properly how to do that part. You watch her again on the next one. And then after that, reinforce the corrected technique over and over. Now, her practice is going to make permanent. She'll be practicing correctly. If a team member doesn't set up a room properly, don't finish setting it up for them. If their notes are missing something, don't go back every day for every appointment and redo them all yourself. Instead, go over their setup or their note with them. See if they can find what's missing. Then teach them. Have them do it themselves. Follow up with lots of reinforcement the next few times. So these are, little examples. But if you establish a culture of teaching in your practice, where if something's not done right, we stop, we correct it, and we practice doing it right, instead of practicing mistakes, we'll have an office that is providing great care to patients. You'll be more efficient. Your team members will love working there because they'll feel like they're growing, and your life will be less stressful because you're not fixing everything yourself. I read a pretty crazy study. Companies in the US that have a structured onboarding program and regular trainings with employees have 82% better retention of employees than those who don't, which is just night and day, right? So while employee mistakes, yes, are frustrating, let's not assume that just because somebody has been around for a while, that means they should have picked it up by now. It's on us to make sure they have the training they need. We're in charge of the course correction. And this touches on my last point that I'll mention, which is about ownership. So Jocko Willink, a former Marines commander who wrote the book Extreme Ownership that we reference sometimes here, he shared a story in that book about an experience he had in Iraq when there was some fighting going on in a really dense urban area. There were US Army troops involved, there were JACO's Marines, and also ally Iraqi forces all involved in the same area. And somehow, during the ordeal, there was some miscommunication, and they had a case of what's called blue on blue, which means friendly fire. The soldiers were actually firing on the position of each other instead of the enemy, which actually is interesting. It happens in war a lot more than we know. But anyways, an Iraqi soldier died, and a few American troops were wounded. Wheelink, in his book, describes this as one of the hardest moments of his career. He and the leaders from the army and the other groups, they met with their superiors after the battle, and instead of pointing fingers at any of the other parties involved or giving, an explanation or an excuse, he simply said, short and sweet, that he personally bore full responsibilities for the accidents and all events that day. And if I remember properly, I think it was quickly known that there was a specific soldier in charge of the communications that messed up. But Willink wouldn't even accept that that soldier was to fault because he, as a leader, has complete responsibility for every action of every person on his team. Their failure is really just his failure. And so instead of demoting Willink for admitting fault, his military superior saw this radical ownership as the type of leadership they needed, and he was promoted. And he went on to develop new protocols for engagement that would actually prevent that type of mistake happening for the rest of the Iraq war. And so the principle here is to look in the mirror. Willink could have pointed to the person who blew it. He could have said, this guy had one job. He's been a soldier here for years. He should have known better. But he didn't do that. It's funny, though, that we totally do that ourselves on our teams. Rather than blaming or complaining, owning our team's actions as a reflection of our own performance as leaders is the first step to building the practice that we want. So, you guys, own your team's performance. Remember that practice makes permanent, and become a teacher to your team. Most dentists don't do this. They just do the fillings and the crowns, but let's face it, that's the easy part. But master this, the talent of helping others learn and improve, and your practice will be completely changed. Thanks for listening. Have a great week. Sicker than your average, sicker than your average. Sicker than your average, sicker than your average.